Now, here we go. Jared, FITC veteran, crowd favorite. He's a futurist, creative technologist, and partner at Argo Design. A few fun facts about Jared. For many years, Jared directed the South by Southwest Interactive opening party, which if you ever saw, and I did twice, I think, it was highly memorable. His passion for sound visualization has led to Jared being the first person to bring live fire onto a TED stage. I'm guessing you signed some releases for that. He's also some dude who hangs out with weirdos in the desert. Those are his words, not mine. Please welcome to the stage, Jared Ficklin.
Thank you. Thank you very much. You know, Al Gore was in the audience when I spoke at TED with his daughter, and I think I have the largest carbon footprint of any TED Talk ever, as far as being on stage. Okay, you guys, normally I'm talking about futurism and technology and how AI is better for more things than that one time we were at the Burning Man with the Pope. But I promise you, this is the last AI in this entire talk. I'm not going to talk about work. I'm not going to talk about futurism. I'm going to talk about my hobby. And it's a rather passionate hobby. But it's not going to be the last joke in this presentation. We're going to start with my favorite joke, which is, how do you know someone has been to Burning Man? They'll tell you. So let's spend 30 minutes doing that, but let's clear the air real quickly. I'm really, really relieved that Chris Rock and Diplo survived Burning Man last year, that they got out. And is Diplo wearing like some sort of next version of the Vision Pro? That's amazing, okay? Like the rest of us just put on paper bags and like enjoyed the rest of the burn. But I think he was gonna make $350,000 DJing the next night, so he's highly motivated to get out. 2017 was a year that I was 1 year out of a divorce. I had spent 2 decades telling people, no, I've never been to Burning Man. I grew up in the desert and I don't want to camp in the desert. It's dusty there. I know this from my upbringing. But my brother ran a maker fair, and Sabrina Merlo, who was at one point the director of programming at Burning Man and was the director of programming at Maker Faire, said, I want to give tickets to all my Maker Faire producers. And when you're a twin, and my brother is my twin, this fun thing happens is anytime someone gives your twin a gift, sometimes they think they should give it to you as well. So all of a sudden I found myself with tickets to Burning Man, and I took this as a universal sign that I should go camp in the desert. But I live in Austin, and so we drove to Black Rock City, which is up in the northern desert of Nevada. It takes 3 days to get there from Austin, Texas, safely. And look how bright-eyed we are. This is after waiting 10 hours in gate, 10-hour line just to get to where they take your tickets. And then we cruised around. We didn't know what we were doing, which caused us to find a place where normally they have organized camps, but we saw a hole and it was 1 a.m, and so we set up our tent, and the next morning everyone was like, welcome to our camp. You've already set up your tent so you can stay. And then I met the man, got gifted some cat ears, got some fur, and the rest of the week sounded a little like this. I had a bike, there were lights, and, well, we're not going to talk about everything that happens at Burning Man. But the rest of the week kind of went like that video in a lot of ways in my memory, but it was a very profound experience, and it was one of serendipity. Catch me later, I'll tell you some stories about extreme levels of serendipity, like gifting a patch to a girl in a camp from the Starfighters movie, only to find out that her dad, who had passed away 2 years earlier, loved that movie and had made her watch it 22 times. To only find later in the week, across the playa, in front of a crazy dubstep show, myself dancing with that same girl, not realizing it for 20 minutes until she brought it up, to only realize that we were camped next to a guy who was a prop master in Hollywood and had done the game cabinet for the last Starfighters. Let's learn about Black Rock City. By the numbers, this is Black Rock City overlaid Toronto, downtown Toronto. That's Casa Loma at the top and the lake at the bottom there. There's 75,000 people. That is capped by the Bureau of Land Management, managers of public land in the United States. It's about 6 square miles of area that they put in. It's in the middle of a dry lake wet. That's hundreds of square miles. There's no water provided. There's no food provided. There is no shelter provided, and money does you no good. You have to bring all of that yourself. There are approximately every year around 444, give or take, art projects that are set up in this 6 square mile. People make and bring 800 mutant vehicles, and there's over 1,500 established and placed theme camps that have different areas, levels of interactivity. Every year, this is under a foot of water. The water evaporates, leaving a caustic alkaline that is most similar to what you would find in the middle of drywall. It's extremely unhealthy and bad for your skin. But the result is it's completely devoid of life, and it's already in the Black Rock Desert that has very little life to begin with. So the only thing that can happen in this environment, and one of the reasons Larry Harvey picked it, was culture as an emergent property. Devoid of influences of flora and fauna, so you don't have forest people, you do have desert people. It's a decidedly humanist creation, okay? It only accommodates people, and it only accommodates what they build. In about 4 weeks, it goes from nothing to this for about 10 days, and then in another 4 weeks, it goes back to absolutely nothing. It is probably best described by the 10 principles, and these are not principles you live by, these are principles that describe the emergent culture that seems to come out every year out there, and at this point, it's now something that is often taught to people. Radical inclusion, gifting, radical self-reliance, decommodification, radical self-expression, communal effort, civic responsibility, leaving no trace, participation, and immediacy. Once again, catch me later. We can go over this, or better yet, go out there and learn. But my favorite definition of it is a dress rehearsal for a post-scarcity society. Because of the radical self-reliance and the decommodification, people bring everything they need, and you can find pretty much everything you want. There's a camp that will give advice on law, tax law. There's a camp that does the 12 steps. There's a camp that will teach you the art of tying people up. I mean, it's all there. It's a big social experiment. To the outside world, it is often positioned as a bunch of people doing drugs in the desert, most of them naked. And you will, in fact, find that there. But you will also find people living this social experiment, and you will find a lot of art, performance art, participation art, and actual art. But there's also a post office. There's a bike repair shop. I spend a lot of my time working at Firm Globe when I'm out there. I just can't get away from the office where I'm the director of sales. And we like to say that K is for closers. That's a joke. I don't do that drug, but a lot of people do. There's also art of all types. There's small art, sculptural art. There is light art that plays with the desert. It's a grand and empty canvas for which you can do really whatever you imagine. There are fake railway stations. There is a small white pole in the desert with headphones that when you put them on, find that they are playing Toto's Africa. The city has an urban area and it has a rural area, deep playa. And in deep playa, you will find that it's very dark. It's a very interesting thing. When you're in deep playa during the day and you see all this stuff around you, you feel like you are the biggest thing. You are the only thing, because you are, in fact, the tallest prominence on this playa. And Larry Harvey would point that out to people, as well as that at night, You see the stars of the galaxy in a way you've never seen before because there's no light pollution there, and the air is incredibly dry. And when at night in the same location, you feel like the smallest thing in the universe. And between those two, it's very hard not to have spiritual experiences out there. So some of the larger art is dedicated to that. This is the temple that's built every year. It's a temple for secular mourning. People place items in it that they want to release, having to do with death or grief or all manner of things. There's a lot of wedding dresses that show up in there. A lot of divorce certificates, and then on Sunday we burn it down, and 70,000 people are perfectly silent while it happens. All you can hear are the flames, of which you have to be a quarter mile away from because it's quite a bonfire, and it's very hot. It's art. At a grand scale and a small scale, you're surrounded by it in a self-actualizing society. It's great. And after that first year in 2017, I wanted to go deeper, and I wanted to bring art. And so I started investigating, what does it take to bring art to the playa? Well, you need an idea, you need a crew, you need tickets, which is the hardest part, but doing art makes that happen. You need approval for your art. You cannot just show up. Burning Man is not an anarchy, nor is it a entirely free society. It's in fact one of the most well-regulated bureaucracies in the world, but it's kind of an adhocracy. All the bureaucracies are filled by volunteers, so they're passionate about things like supporting art on the playa. They hand out about $2.4 million in grants every year for people to create art on the playa, and a lot of that art doesn't just stay on the playa, it goes out into communities afterwards. And you gotta work really hard to build that art. I have a camp that I put together called The Last Starfighters, based on that very serendipitous moment the first time that I went. And in 2018, we said, let's bring the augmented reality porta potties, okay? You guys are familiar with these. If you're a longtime FITC people, I have been activating them for years, and I figured, do what you know, because you're out in this really harsh environment, right? And the augmented reality porta potties tell you if someone is sitting or standing in a porta potty, so that you can make a selection on the correct porta potty to enter. But I was like, projection is not gonna work in a dusty environment. So I was like, you know what? Let's reconfigure these into some form of electromechanical analog on the front of the door. I was like, what would that be? And so I discovered something called a roller blind sign, but I also discovered they don't make them very big. They're usually on the front of a bus or the side of a football field where they roll a banner over, and they're not very popular. And they're actually really curiously difficult and intricate mechanisms that I didn't realize. My first effort was just a chain and a motor, but the diameter of the spools on the top and bottom changes as the paper comes, and therefore it binds up. So then I went and did more research, and I discovered that you have to have these special gears, and then you have to put the motor in a certain place, and you have to accommodate for all this stuff. So I Googled my way through all of that until I had a working prototype, but I was like, wow, I can't just go to a construction site, so I had to buy a porta potty. The lengths of, because I was like, you know what? You don't build things in Black Rock City. You set them up. There is no Lowe's nearby. In fact, the closest Walmart is about 4 hours drive away, and that's without the wait and gate to get there. So once you're there, you're there. You're setting things up. You do not build them there. So I had to buy a porta potty so that I would understand how porta potties work. Right, and then I figured out how to mount things to the porta potty. And then I was like, you know what, I don't want smiley faces. I want cool photographic imagery. So I went to the Creative Commons and found cool photographic imagery of a license that I would be able to use of people standing and sitting. And then I found a panorama of the playa to indicate when it was open. And I started testing, and luckily at work we have a plotter, and plotters are great things to have access to because you put ink in them and you get giant posters out. And I discovered that you can find waterproof fixed vinyl banners to put it all on that's strong enough, and that the back is actually pretty IR reflective, but you know it's not. Gaffer tape is not IR reflective, so I put 2 at the top, 1 and 1, and then I used little IR sensors on the back to determine what the position was. After that, it was simple math put into an Arduino, and off to the races. I had an other mill that I bought, and I started using it to cut custom parts because it turns out that the chains I wanted to use were from bikes. The cogs that I needed that were special were a different, and all the diameters were different. So I had to make a bunch of adapters just to put this thing together, and that was a really fun process. And then after I got one working, I scaled up, okay? I needed to make, I decided 10 of these, a full bank of porta potties on the playa, right? And so you bought a bunch of it, got a crew. My brother Joey is part of the crew, and he's a carpenter, so he helped me make all these things the same size. And he made sure that the man was hidden inside of our design there on the top corner there. And the whole crew put this all together, and then you pack it as neatly as possible in a trailer because you're a Ficklin, and this is what your dad taught you to do. Yeah, real life Tetris. Don't play me at Tetris. I can pack a trailer like this. It's a 9,000-pound trailer. You put a truck on it, and you drive to the Black Rock City. This year, you're there early because you're setting something up. So you only wait in gate 2 hours, and you're like, that's pretty nice perk for spending all this money and time building something. You set up your tent, and now we went through a series of new rituals. Once we were out there, Artery builds a giant map of all of the art. Every dot on this map is an art installation of some size. And there's ours right there. And then you find a guy who has this crazy golf cart. And sometimes it's a woman too, but in this case it was a guy. It's, I don't know, it's some sort of rabbit skull that's weirdly anatomically correct. And he leads you out by GPS coordinates to where your art project will be. And he goes in circles and circles and circles because he keeps headed towards the porta potties. And he can't believe that the project, he's like, there's something wrong. We're like, no, go to the porta potties because our art project is going to be the porta potties that Burning Man had set up and that we had to use, right? It's a really shitty medium. And then you pound in your floof, which has a recycled CD with your art project identified it because it's a very bureaucratic system, and they will go by your art several times a week to see that it is working, that it is lit up safely, that you are cleaning up the trash around it, which was not very fun for us, but I gotta tell you, the ground score that you find around a porta potty is insane. Lots of phones, shoes, bags with mysterious substances that you throw away immediately. Never eat ground score, that's an advice. I've never done it. We did not want the porta potties to look like old beat up porta potties, so we brought a bunch of vinyl wrap and spent a week wrapping the porta potties. Part of the team was doing that in 35-mile-an-hour winds, even though it doesn't. This was like the one moment of clarity before everything went upside down. Meanwhile, I was back in our shelter that we had assembled with 6 sides, so none of the little wire clippings that came off when I was repairing something made it down to the playa, setting up the units themselves, right? When no one is in any of the porta potties, it makes this grand panoramic vista of the Black Rock Mountains, which Black Rock City is named after. And I thought it'd be how great it would be to have those there and the Black Rock Mountains behind it. And then you run tests, because I was like, are these things going to work on the playa? So I wrote a randomization scheme and had them go for a full day, and they worked great, and I was happy. Then the winds came up while we were wiring and finishing our setup. And this is what it looks like. You can barely see your hand this far out. This is a whiteout. Anytime you get winds of about 15 miles, 20, 30 miles an hour, this happens. We expect frontline winds of 70 miles an hour every year, but then we had the augmented reality porta potties. But I never got to see the panorama with the mountains behind it because it was always so dusty. You'll see we attempted to use solar power too, and that thing in the back is a giant installation that's about the size of a small city of all kinds of tunnels you can explore, and eventually if you work out the code, you'll find a speakeasy. But you won't because they burned it down at the end of the week. Here's the way it works. I just went in there, I'm standing. Now I'm sitting. And now I'm standing again. And then I'm done. And I would say, if you give me a little bit of your privacy, I will give you a feature. No one needs privacy. Everyone needs features. If you'll give me more privacy, I'll give you more features. And the line between information and too much information is a lot shorter than the line to these porta potties. At night, we lit them up with gallery lighting that you could see from a mile away. It was gorgeous. Or occasionally, they were lit up by fire, which was also gorgeous. And it's really fun, because we know someone's in there right now. This is a mutant vehicle. Porta potties are a frequent stop for mutant vehicles, and they bring participants. And that's great, because interactive art doesn't exist until you have a participant. But the participants are not always gentle. And one night, the Mayan Warrior, which is a giant art car, showed up. And 20,000 people showed up with it, and it kind of broke them. Some participants thought, this is great. There's porta potties, let's just throw a rave right here. This guy would show up every day, and I met him out there at 4 o'clock, and I kind of stood around, and I heard him telling everyone the story of how he had created the augmented reality porta potties. Especially to very attractive women, and then he would ask if they would want to go for a ride on his art car, and I was like, dude, it's my project. He's like, that's amazing. I've been telling people it's my project all week long. It's a great project. You want a beer? And the dust comes, and everything breaks. And why did it break? I don't know. But my commute was 2 miles every day out there to check on the batteries and to check on the units and to replace them. And often they would look like this, but I'd be riding towards this. And what I learned is that metal expands at a different rate from plastic and woods, and the temperature swings are so violent that it was literally breaking the pieces in the calibration. But I had a whole crew of starfighters, and we would diligently repair them, and we kept them working. And we had these guys from United Site Services, and they came 6 times a day because we were an art project, which meant we were the cleanest porta potties on the playa. But eventually, I just scrolled them to images and left them as a photo gallery, because by Thursday, they did not work, which is probably a world record for interactive art of this type at Burning Man. And it's beautiful. And I met the man again, and I got a lot of gifts again, and then we had to take everything down, and then we had to literally sweep the playa clean and restore it exactly to the pristine state it was, and did the same with our camp. And they do check this with a GPS map. And if you get red, you aren't really invited back next year. In fact, for the BLM, they lay out 12 pieces of paper, they select 12 random acres, they pick up everything on those, and when the burn is completed, if any of those papers are filled all the way full, they do not get to renew their license next year. So after 75,000 people, we have 12 A11, 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper, or less amount of trash that remains on the playa. The next year, I decided to do more and be bigger. This is the Trailing Soul. It's 100 yards long, and I created it to study immediacy. As a Taurus, I like to plan things. Immediacy is the hardest principle for me. Same story, a little faster this time. Found a bunch of fence hardware, put more and more of it together. Found these whip lights on Amazon and said, those are durable. They're meant for dune buggies. That's great, because we're out in the sand. Bought some fabric, sewed some stuff together, put it in the drive, and I said, I really like the way that moves in the wind, right? I knew I wanted something long and something moving, and this is what it turned into. I liked the way the lights breathed, but I realized I had to do paperwork. So I got to work, made a rendering of what it would all look like when it's finished, did a very detailed project plan, did a very detailed budget. You have to submit these in order to get approved. Did a very detailed map of our camp. You have to submit this in order to get placed. Once that was all done and I had my crew, my tickets and the rest, went back to building. Need batteries to run the thing. Big batteries, turns out 10 amps takes about 225 amp hours of 12 volts. Started scaling it up, did a test, went to Maker Faire, great place to test things. Very smooth, not very smooth. Realized the batteries are heavy and that you're not gonna be able to pull them around. Changed the design of the battery box and bought this thing. It's called an air tug. It's for moving aircraft around at a small airport. so it could do 10,000 pounds. I was like, that's perfect. I think 10,000 pounds of force will work. And then you scale up, and you buy a lot of stuff, and your eyes go very wide because you're spending a lot of money. And you get a crew, and your crew begins to channel their inner assembly line worker, and you build wiring harnesses, and you build things, and you sew fabric, and you get all of it together, and you test lights and batteries to make sure they work, and you build a whole solar charging system because you don't want to fill a generator anymore because it spills gas on the playa and all this bad stuff. Got to build a lot more battery boxes. Got to finish it all. Your brother puts really cool Starfighter logos on it so the light that's in it will shine out everywhere, because if you don't have a light, it's perfectly dark and our car will run over it, or someone will hit it with a bike and hurt themselves, right? And then you test the air tug, you create a lighting rig for the air tug, and you create a way to get the air tug out to your art project, and then you go full scale, and you test. Because we don't build at Black Rock City, we set it up at Black Rock City. After your test, you realize that air tug is really powerful, it's gonna kill someone, so you invent some safety things, like a speed limiter. Seriously, thing pinned me against the wall of my garage, and if someone else hadn't been there, I probably would have been suffocated. I was like, damn, this thing is dangerous. So build a safety relief as well, because you realize that if it gets away from someone, it's just going to keep running until it hits the Black Rock Mountains. You pack it all in a trailer very, very nicely. You weigh that trailer because safety third. But the transportation department does not think that way. They'll just write you a $20,000 ticket. Fill up with water, wait and gate, and find a new city, because you're there even earlier to set up something even bigger, and the city is not even halfway built. And then you spend a lot of time setting up, and holy cow, it's not dusty. You have a whole day of sun, and you realize a whole day of sun is really hot. You get very dehydrated, and you drink water. You always drink water. And when you finish, you feel like you have something beautiful, and it's moving, and it's organic. And you thought it was really, really big, because it was when you were in a city, but you put it out on the playa, and it looks really, really small. And don't worry, the dust did come. The dust always comes. The dust gets on everyone. It doesn't matter if you're Chris Rock, Elon Musk, myself, or Larry Harvey. The dust settles equally on everyone. I was very relieved that it didn't just break apart, but we did have to change the design on the playa, and we had to literally bolt it in place when we sat it there, because it was going to blow away, right? Because the dust is really real. And then someone from another camp gave us this, and we dressed it up, and we put it at the front, and it became a thing. And people gave it gifts, and people thought they were real, and people stood there and talked to him for hours. We called him Joe Burner. But really, the design of this was to have an apparition, okay? And the apparition is walking across the playa, and in the modern burn, everyone's thinking, oh, Diplo is playing at 2 a.m. I got to get to the show. They're not here, they're there. And everyone, as you move through the universe, you're leaving a trail of energy. It's what you're thinking, it's what you're feeling, it's influencing the universe behind you. And everyone's just blowing through your energy, thinking, I got to get to the Mayan warrior. But we made her energy physically manifest through light and fabric. So as you're going across the playa, you run into it. It's 100 yards long. Now you're here. You have to make a decision. What do I do? Do I stop? Do I turn left? Do I turn right? But it brings back immediacy. And it worked extremely well, as you can see. There's an entire group of people not knowing quite what to do. Some of them are going around, and we heard great stories like, my camp, we were all headed out to the Mayan warrior, and half of us went right, and half of us went left, and we didn't see each other for 2 days. Each night we had different apparitions and different themes. And it was mobile. I love this story. This guy said, that's my landmark. You use landmarks out there to get home. He told me that was my landmark. You guys, fuck you. Fuck you. He's like, I've been navigating all week by that thing. And then I thought about it, and he wasn't angry. He was saying, fuck your burn, which is something that we say out there. He was using the navigate it, because every night when he went home towards that thing, he ended up somewhere else in some new delightful moment. Here's my brother as some sort of Doctor Who's shaman pulling it around. Here's me and one of my crew members wearing these gorgeous Dan Schwab masks. People literally just sat down in front of us. It was amazing. And we were brave by Thursday nights. We were taking it right through the sound camps where 10,000 people are dancing and just cutting them in half. And we had people who would help us. It's 100 yards long. You don't really know what the back end is doing. So we had members of crew walking along and had these huge poles because if you misjudged something or you didn't see a guy wire, they had to lever it to the side, right? And here's one of those people who decided to sit and stay and enjoy. It takes about 8 minutes for the entire thing to pass by. It's going very slow and very silently. And that light has the effect nearby of being a light, but when you're about 100 yards or more away, it's just light on the ground, so the apparition in front looks like they're floating. On Friday night, we had some fun, and we went to Gas Town, where there's lots of fire and lots of Burning Man. It's great. And that was the temple that year. This kind of very Japanese-like stacks. 2020 sucked because they canceled the burn. And so I wanted to go to the burn anyway. So I took those augmented reality porta-potty units. I made a new graphic that created a new panorama. And I decided, what if I could meditate my way there? And I had some friends throwing an event locally, since we didn't have the burn to go to. So I put memories of the burn on the rest of the panels, and I put a little Arduino sensor there that sensed stillness. If you moved, you lost stillness. If you sat there, it accumulated stillness, and that stillness translated into each individual image. So if you sat still long enough, you would be transported to the playa. And I set it up, and people found it very challenging. For a couple reasons. One is, I'll tell you in a second, but the other one is that they don't sit still in their life very much anymore. People had various reactions. I have seen people move to tears. I realized I could change the banner, so I started taking it to other events, right? It's logarithmic, okay? What that means is that we're exponentially adding time each unit as you're sitting there. What this does to you is the first 5 feel like a pattern because it's just a little bit of time. But the 5th one goes past the just noticeable difference. So between 5 and 6, you're sitting there thinking like, is it working? Am I working? People have this weird thought is, am I doing it right? I'm told this thinking, am I doing this right? Which if you work out into a full sentence, translates to, am I sitting still right? And then the 6th one moves and they go like, oh, okay, all I have to do is sit still. Between the 7th and the 8th takes almost 2.5 minutes. But people, once they get past the 5th one, they usually get to the last one. If they shift because their thing, it rolls back a couple and they go, oh, I have to sit still. You have to meditate. It's radical stillness to get to the end, right? And then I did one for a conference, a virtual conference, House of Beautiful Business, and I decided to do a little bit of performance art. So I sat there and they were going to have 1 hour of silence. So I set all the timing that it would take a full hour to transform this into Lisbon, where they normally would hold the conference. That mask weighs 15 pounds. It was brutal. About 2 minutes in, I was like, what have I done? I've done no training. 400 people are watching me on a live stream, and we have to be perfectly silent. I cannot move. And it was a pretty interesting experience. 2021 was awful because they canceled the burn again, and this time I was just very depressed, and I didn't want to do anything. And then I remembered that I had to cancel things too. One time I wanted to take the Zen gardener out to Burning Man. They said no. I wanted to take this thing called the Messenger, which is full-scale telephone poles. You make a call from one side to the other side, and then in light, it would visualize the call going back and forth along these beams, right? And then if you said words that involved commodification of things like Coke or money, it would print out a little ticket. And it would have instructions on it, like randomly go to this camp and do this activity in order to pay for it. But the engineering of this was very complex, and it turns out you can't dig more than 3 feet into the playa, and so it got turned down. The Whisperia did not get turned down, but I never got them done, right? So 2022, I was like, I want to go even deeper into this. I want to involve myself in changing the burn, and I created the solar library because art is beautiful. But art needs power. But solar panels are not beautiful. This is what I discovered with the trailing soul. They do not scale. They require engineering. They are electrically dangerous. They are always on and will kill you if you don't know what you're doing. They are a pain in the butt to transform, and they're aesthetically problematic, and they have very sharp corners. So if you don't engineer them right, they're dangerous. So we decided to take care of the engineering. You would apply for a library card. Instead of a generator, you would buy batteries, and then you would apply, use the Solarian code to understand things like transporting batteries, and you would check in and check out. Each day you put your batteries in, charge them, and then bring them back out. Make it all flat packable like IKEA, so it's easy to transport, and have a whole new guild of volunteers called Solarians to help people with it, and we had a plan. And they said yes, and so I got a fabricator to weld because I don't trust my welding for structural things. I got a crew together so we could build a single prototype. Are you noticing the rhythm now? We then scaled up, built 6 prototypes, painted 6 doors, did 6 of everything. We had to use a warehouse because it's very hot in Austin, Texas. Luckily, there was one that gave us one for free. I bought a forklift. I think this photo defines me. Elegance and labor. Pack it up in a very nice package and drive it to the burn where you set it up and you successfully have, well, essentially a porta potty for batteries because it's me, I love porta potties. At night, it's beautiful. It gives this rhythm of the sun setting on it, and in fact, it creates its own perpetual sunset out the back, right? So there we are. We put it there. We built it. We had a lot of people to thank, which is Artery, the org, my brother, who I could not do this without, Carrie, I could not do this without, the last Starfighter's crew, which at this point is about 50 people, the Solarians themselves, Heat, which is heavy equipment operators who bring their equipment and their skills out to the playa to help people set all this stuff up, and ASS, which is Art Support Services, whose slogan is, all artists get ass. Floyd, the flip side, war itself, the 6 projects that actually took the brave step of being part of our pilot year. And these are those projects. Just to give you a taste of all the different kinds of art that you will find out there. We printed out library cards for each one. We knew exactly their capacity. We reserved that capacity behind cold protected doors so that participants who are very curious when it electrocute themselves, they brought their batteries in, they hooked them on, turned on the switch, came back at 6 p.m. and put them on their projects. And this is what the output was. We saved almost 1,000 direct fumes. Transporting solar panels takes another truck and trailer, so we saved another 17,000 pounds based on where our artists were from, and we estimate we saved about 5.5 gallons of spilled gas on the playa, which is my favorite thing about it, as long with the aesthetics. We found places to improve, and in 2023 we did improve those. We doubled the numbers, and we had a plan, and of 2030 we're going to be supporting around 200 small art projects out there if we can scale correctly, but we will need help and money for that. In 2023, we went out with the Solar Library again, as we will for a long, long time. But I wanted to also make it better. So we built our own gantry crane, so we don't even need the diesel of the heavy equipment to place it anymore. And it survived the dust very well. But I wanted to tackle these guys, the wisteria flowers. So I made them as well. I got a crew. We built one, then we scaled up, figured out we had the money for 4, and this is what they do. And I'm almost done.
A Great and Startling Truth by Maya Angelou. We, this people, on a small and lonely planet, traveling through causal space, past aloof stars.
It's a music box for spoken word. We say the wisteria flowers will give you their wisdom so long as you are willing to work for it. As long as you're cranking, it's playing. Each one has a different.
Meet Larry Harvey. I'm pleased to have him here at this table for the first time. Welcome.
This is a 20-minute interview with Larry Harvey by Charlie Rose. It's really amazing. Go look it up on YouTube.
Hi, analysis statement, and this is 10 questions for
Same thing, a little longer.
Hugh Hefner, the founder of Playboy magazine. Thank you for joining us.
With Hugh Hefner. And then the participants came. The 4th one, this one where this guy is all 8 hours of the Cambridge Lecture Series by Stephen Hawking. Now, if you stop cranking, it goes back to the beginning. Because there's a little bit of a prankster culture in Burning Man. It was partly founded by the Cacophony Society out of San Francisco. They are anarchists, and we brought that spirit too. And I don't know if anyone got every time I was out there, people were cranking, they'd stop, and then they go, oh, fuck. And then they make little groups of people to try and get to the end. And they survived the dust very well, but they did not survive the rain because it has not rained in 30 years at Burning Man. And when it did, it was beautiful. It was not the catastrophe that I learned that we had survived when I got out. That's because the press was calling in because they weren't allowed in. And they got members of the Cacophony Society. And so there had been cannibalism. There had been Ebola. Chris Rock died. Someone was electrocuted. None of this was true. They were just seeing what they could get the press to print. And the modern press will print anything. They don't really care whether it's true or not. That's a weird thing. And this story is a great illustration, and that's the one comment on analog society I will make. Anyways, these turned out to accidentally be range catchment barrels instead of art, and so they all died. And when I say leave no trace, we mean leave no trace. This rust spot had to come home with us. If we find a human hair, it comes home with us, right? This is what we did during the rain. This is what most of Burning Man was doing during the rain. And we still burned the man, because we always do. We cleaned up and we went home. Thank you very much.
Wow. I'll have a drink for you. We've got about 5 minutes. Let's do a couple quick questions.
Okay,
You cool?
great.
Yeah?
Great.
Man, that was fun. A lot of the questions, there's a lot about, the kind of logistics, I suppose, of Burning Man. I think maybe, just because of the limited time, I'd rather maybe focus on some of the more kind of personal questions, I suppose.
Oh, great.
The first one that I'm curious about, it's just a shit ton of work. And
Yeah.
what is it that motivates at least you or maybe your whole team? I don't know, why do you guys do this? Why do you do so much work? For free, I guess, right?
No, not for free. You pay a lot of money.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah, okay. For negative, but yeah, money.
It is a negative outcome.
Yeah,
Look,
yeah.
you don't need a lot of money to go to Burning Man. I've had members of the camp get there for about $900, and now that's a lot of money to some people when you think about you're doing a 10-day vacation where you can do anything you want. Like, they can't build a cruise ship that holds Burning Man, but a cruise can cost you a lot more than $900. But there's also, it's not an austere place. Elon Musk goes out there, every RV has a power wall and Starlink, and radical self-reliance means you can show up with whatever you're willing to build and take down, right? I'm out there for the social experiment. This is probably the only place on earth where you can live 10 days in a self-actualized society, meaning your needs and wants are largely met, and all you have to do is now self-actualize for 10 days. And the thing that surprised me the most in 2017 was how very aware we were of that. Everyone was very aware that if this went to day 12, it would be a shit show. We know that this is a precious thing that lasts for 10 days. Everyone would like to figure out how to extend that, right? And if all these AI and robots take care of all the food growing and take care of all the stuff, we'll be able to self-actualize too. And it's really fun. On Thursday, everyone starts working, right? This is why there are camps that repair bicycles. By Thursday, people are bored. On Monday, they're all like, I don't get to be a model in my everyday life, so I'll be a model. I don't get to be gay, I'll be gay. I don't get to be a lawyer, I get to be a lawyer. I don't get to be a barista, I have to be a lawyer at home, I'll be a barista. That's what's amazing about it.
I have some friends, maybe even in your camp, I don't know, who've gone, and more than one of them have told me that it's a chance for them to be somebody completely different and reinvent themselves every year or whatever. Some people just go as themselves, and that seems fascinating to me.
You end up coming back and realizing that you can express yourself more than you think. So it does have an effect of changing you, but I never think it actually changes someone. What it does is it gives them the ability to fully express themselves, and they bring that courage home, and so more of their authentic self starts coming out. That can, if you've been living a life where you're really performative, that can be a very jarring thing at first. But after a while, you find that it's a more beautiful way to live.
Yeah.
Just be your authentic self.
Who is it? Who would you say maybe Burning Man isn't for? Who shouldn't go to Burning Man? Is there a kind of person that you're like, you know what, maybe just stay home?
Someone who's looking for the VIP room.
The VIP room?
Yeah.
Is that
you'll be looking a long time. You'll find the trash fence because someone will tell you that Daft Punk is playing out there. And then you'll just be miserable.
It's just not the right motivation for that kind of an event.
It's not, yes. It's also, it's not for influencers either, because it doesn't really, it's very hard to influence people out there.
Yeah.
The decommodification, by the way, is also marketing. You may have noticed in the pictures, people tape over every logo, and you cannot believe how noisy it is in society. I'm not just talking about the vehicles, but everyone just not even asking for your attention, but using it to try and influence you to buy something or be something or vote for something, and there's none of that out there. And so while it's very noisy because of the wind and the constant like EDM playing like in the distance, it's also very, very quiet, and you have time for your own thoughts, and you end up having more attention to place on things. It's an amazing kind of piece that you just don't get in modern society. People just so rudely, and I'm marketing, and a lot of people here work in marketing. I have a degree in marketing. So rudely these days just insert commodification of the world into your attention without permission.
Yeah.
So that's another nice thing. So no, it's not a place for, like Coachella is the VIP experience.
There you go. Okay,
Go there.
that's the counterpoint.
If you're not willing to work, get dusty, really be a participant, really be open to the experience, don't go.
Okay, I want to keep us on track here, but I think there's definitely people who are going to be asking a lot of questions about this. It's fascinating, and you did such a great job showing us your own project,
Well,
so
as
thank you
the
for that.
opening joke is true.
Yeah.
I love to talk about it, so
Good.
just find me later, we'll talk
Let's
about
give Jared a round of applause for sharing that. That's awesome, so good.